Hello and welcome, my name is Paul Shillito, and in this video I'll show you how you can hardwire the cable of your BeatStep Pro into the BeatStep when the USB connector becomes faulty. And it's very easy to damage, and in fact they break off the boards incredibly easy. This is my BeatStep, and the story behind it is I bought it, it's probably about a year to 18 months old now. I used it a bit and then I put it to one side, and when I came to use it again I found that the connector, which was normally plugged in here, was very intermittent. I'd sort of move it one way, it'd go on, then it'd go off, go on, go off, and it would only work if you could hold it in a certain position. So I thought, well, there's something wrong with the connector. I don't think it's the cable, it must be the connector. So I thought I'd have a look inside. So I took the machine apart, and when I took it apart the connector fell off. It was literally completely detached from the circuit board. Now these little connectors are very small, they're surface mount, and they are really designed for equipment which is not as big as this. This is quite a big piece of equipment, it's quite heavy. And if it's plugged in and it has to get moved or the cable gets yanked over to one side, it's very easy to break the connectors. It's pulled up, down, it can snap that connector. It should come out, but it won't. And what it will do is it will break the connector inside. And in my case, it physically broke it off the board completely. Now I'll show you what I mean by how tiny these connectors are. You probably know because you've seen them, but here's one. Here's the same type of connector which is actually used on here, and we'll just zoom into this so we can see it a bit better. Now, this is the little slimline micro connector. Very small, very lightweight. Now compare that to the one which is fitted to most audio equipment. It's that. This is the one which you'll find on the back of nearly every piece of audio equipment or professional audio equipment that uses USB. This is the proper one here. Much more robust, much bigger. And give you an example, here's my Korg SQ1 sequencer, rival to the BeatStep in some ways. Again, it uses this type of connector and it is much more robust. It doesn't fall off. Unlike the, if it gets yanked around, it won't break, it's much stronger. You really have to be very rough-handed to break these things. But this thing is designed for the job. It's much more robust. And that's what should have been fitted to this. I see in the KeyStep, which is not yet available, that they've actually put on a power supply connector on here, because this only works with this cable. This is the power cable for the BeatStep. So you have no other way of getting any power into the BeatStep, which is a complete pain in the backside, because again it's got to run through a USB connector. The KeyStep has a 9-volt power connector on it, so you can run it from the power. So therefore, when it doesn't need to be connected to a computer, it can be connected to a normal power supply. And then obviously the connector on there is much more robust. You don't need to connect this to a computer. You can have it running standalone, and this still needs to be connected to drive the power from it. And I think that was a design flaw, and I think they've seen their error in their ways, and they have actually put the 9-volt or 5-volt connector on the back of the KeyStep to get round that. But anyway, what we'll do here is we'll take this apart and I'll show you how you can actually do this job. It's a simple job and it requires no additional components. All we're going to do is I'll show you how I used this original cable, the Arturia cable, chopped the end off and wired it into the board. There's only 4 connections, +5, 0 volts, and 2 data plus and data minus. That is all there is to the USB connector. So you've only got 4 cables to actually connect to the board. It's a bit small and a bit fiddly, but if you do it, it's simple and straightforward. The only other modification you need to do is you need to cut a slot in this top cover. It's plastic, so it's easy to do. And you can see here, just where the connector was, I've cut this slot in here. That was to get the cable through, because otherwise you'd have to sort of wire it in and then keep this here whilst you're sort of fiddling around. It's much easier just to cut a slot in there, and you can take the lid on and off much easier. So let's see what we need to do. We'll take this back off first, and using my trusty drill here, I would use a normal screwdriver, but the screwdriver which I have to do this job, and it's quite a small screwdriver, the tip is broken, so, and I haven't got a replacement one at this point in time. And actually this is a quicker way of doing it. So being the lazy man that I am, I will do this. There's a few screws in here. And then we'll take the back panel off. There we are, back panel comes off. Put this to one side. And here is the board. You can't see anything here because you actually need to take this board off and work on the other side of it. Now, in order to do that, you're going to have to take off the knobs on the front. When you disassemble this thing completely, you'll also find that all these pads on here are touch pads, and they just rest on the printed circuit board. And what you would normally do is then, when you put it back together again, you'll put these in the case here, so it's easier to actually sit the thing back on down. But you'll see how it comes apart when I do it. But first of all, we'll just take off these knobs here. They're all the same, so it doesn't really matter. And they come off very easy, as you can see. Like that. Now we've got all the knobs off. Now we need to flip back over again. And we need to take out these small screws here. We can see them. They are the silver screws, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. They're actually marked with a little screw icon. So if we look carefully on here, where are we? He says, I'm trying to find my finger on there. There's one, and you can see the little screw marking there, and then there, and there. These are showing which screws to actually take out. That's what you need to do. So it's quite easy to see what you need to do there. There is a little board here which comes off, which you can just pull that little brown connector. The little brown bit there pulls out. You just zoom into that so you can see what I was actually fiddling around with then. That bit there, if you can see, if I pull there and there, this cable will then come out like that. This connects to the slider at the side, the roller. That's what that is actually for. So we'll come back out. Now we'll take these other screws, the silver screws, out. I say the cost of this actual repair is really time to actually do the job. There's no parts required because you're not going to put in a replacement connector, usually, because if it's broken off, it will have broken the surface mount tracks which it's connected to, which means you'll probably have to replace the board to put a connector on. And be honest, it's not worth the effort because the thing is so weak, it'll only break off again anyway. So you might as well do the job in such a way that it won't fall off again. And if you're hard wiring it to the board itself, you'll get rid of that problem, which is a connector. And I say they should have put a different connector, a bigger connector, or a better system on there, but for whatever reason they did actually use that one. And I say I think it should have been a bigger one or a different style one. because they are just not up to the job of being used on a studio piece equipment, which is quite heavy and get lugged around, and you can quite easily knock it out. Now then, so we should have got all the screws off there. We'll soon find out in a moment if we have. No, we haven't. We've got another 2 here. In fact, we've got another 3. There's quite a few, as you can see. Probably about 20 or something. And, oh, there's another one. Eventually you will find that the thing will just pop off when you've got rid of all the screws. Now actually mine isn't popping off because I've got my cable in here, which is my little adaptation here, and that's it. It slips in because obviously we've got the connections behind. It pushes onto the board, so you've got to move, sort of slip it forward. That's it. Push this back. Eventually it will, there it is, come off. And then we've got the printed circuit board, and you'll see that all the bits here stay in that position. Actually, if you do it this way, last time I took this apart, I actually did it the other way, and I dropped the board off. If you keep it here, then these will stay in position. Otherwise, it just means you've got to take all these off and then put them all back in again, back to where they actually are. Now, this roller board here needs to be just on there. I shall sort that out in a moment. Right, bring that over to there, put it out of the way, and now we'll look at what we've actually got here. What I did was, this is the connection here. Now, if I can get this so that we can see, now my camera is going out of focus because I can't get focus that close up, so we'll just have to explain. On here, I'll get my glasses on to see what I'm actually talking about. We've got the cable. What I did was I cut the cable and I cut off the connector. So if you imagine it on this one here, we cut off this connector here, and then we just put bare end. So that's what it would have looked like. It would look like that, with the bare end sticking out. And then strip back the cable. And in here we have got the connections. We've got red, white, green and black. And if you look on Google and you look up the wiring for a USB port, you actually see that I use a standard wiring. And we've got red, which is the plus 5 volts. We've got black, which is the negative, or 0 volts. And then you've got the white and the green. I can't remember which one is which is the positive and negative. But when you actually look at the cable on here, what I did was I connected the end of this into the faulty connector, and I used a multimeter and I stripped back the cable so you could actually measure the resistance between the connectivity between the cable and the connector. And I worked out that effectively it goes positive, data minus, data plus, and then 0 volts. So it was just a case of then copying the same thing onto here, and you can't quite see it on there, but it is there. That's where the board would be mounted on, or the connector would be mounted on. There are a couple of resistors. There's R22 and R23, and you need to connect it to the end of R22, which is to the outer part of the board, and R23. These are surface mount components. This is where your fine work comes in, your fine detail work comes in, because you're going to have to strip the cable back, tin the ends, and then just connect the end of the cable, solder it onto the end of the surface mount component. And if you're using a small soldering iron like this, you can actually do it. So the connections are black to the ground part here, which is this ground trace. The red trace goes to the end of a capacitor, C1, which is there. That's C1. Again, it's to the inside one, as you can see. If you look at this, you'll see that the, I don't know if you can get the angle on there. So I can't really zoom in any further on this. Actually, what I might have to do is take a photo or something close up so you can see. And then the green one goes to R23, which is the end closest to the edge of the board, and then the white one goes to R22, which is closest to the end of the board. And that is it. The job is done. Again, the shield here, which is this braid, cut that back, tie it up, and then I've soldered it to the edge here. Again, this is a ground connection, it's a 0-volt connection, so that will work on there. So if anybody who is a service engineer who knows what they're doing, you could show them this and they should be able to work out where this actually goes. You can actually work out from the USB port how these are actually connected, because it goes in a linear sequence along the actual connections. And that's pretty much it. On there. It's actually interesting, I'm looking at these encoders here because I've just replaced the encoders on an Arturia Origin, and they were a problem, and these encoders are a different make, and hopefully they are not going to be a problem like they were in the Arturia Origin. So now it's a case of putting this back together again. Now on this, if I remember correctly, yeah, this sits on top there like that, and then the whole lot will then drop back in on top of here. Now, as you can see, this thing, it's all there. If I pull it up and turn it over, then all these will just fall out. But these are the contact pads, which are the bits which make contact on here, and effectively your drum pads here, the contact pads on here, the buttons, and there's the roller on there. These are all the pads which these things touch, and that's how it makes the contact. So we need to now sort of reverse the process, and yeah, there we are. This bit here, which fell out, it does actually fit in. There's a little edge there, you see that? It drops in to there. So there's an edge there, and an edge there, an edge there, an edge there. So when you're putting this in, sort of get it under that part there, and it'll drop in there. And that's it. That goes on there. All these other bits are in place. Make sure there's no hairs stuck in there like there is on that one there. And now we can effectively put this back together again. The other bit was there, I cut out this bit here. See this slot I showed before? I actually heated it up with a soldering iron, and then I cut round the edge with a knife. I made it slightly smaller than the cable so it grips the cable. The cable will go through, but it's a bit of a tight fit. But otherwise, that works fine. So now, the reverse, we can go back in here. And what you've got to do is you've got to sort of thread it in and down, put my cable in there like that. And then obviously what you've got there is you've got the encoders which go in. Yeah, and there, that's it. You've got to push down whilst getting these connectors to slot in the holes at the back. So it's a little bit fiddly, but there we are. We've now got it back in position, and now effectively we can go backwards and start putting the screws back in again. Best thing to do, I find, is to go one end to the other end, almost like a torque sequence, and then to the other end there, and then over there. This cable can then go back in again here, So that just pushes in. Show you there. Pull the little brown connector out, so that's sitting out, so it'll allow it to go in. Push that in there like that. That pushes in, your silver bits will disappear inside, and then just push the brown ears back in, and that's it. The job's done. So we're ready there. Now at this point, what you could do is to just connect it to a USB power supply to check that you've actually got everything back together again. So rather than putting the whole thing back, you could actually just fire it up like now. In fact, what I'll do is, to prove I've actually done it right and make sure that I am actually doing it right, I'll get a USB power supply and we'll try it now before I go any further. So I'll just pause the video. Okay then, I've got the USB power supply ready. I'll just plug it in and then we'll be able to check if it's all working okay. And there you go. Oh, just lights all flash on. Right, so quick check. Pads are lighting up. They're working. Set the sequencer going. Sequencer, there we are. You can just about see that there. Check the bits and pieces are working there. The only thing really is the roller that it's difficult to check on there. But everything, there's nothing else has been changed. It's really just a case of checking that all these pads are actually in place. That's what you actually want to do. And you want to just check. Because if you've taken this off and these came out and you want to put them back in again, it probably wouldn't look right anyway if they weren't in place, because they wouldn't stick up properly. But you just want to just check before you've screwed it all back together again, and you find out you've left something or you've done something wrong, and then you've got to take it all apart again. So that's basically it. The rest of this is now just screwing these back in here like this. This is the boring bit. So I think I might speed up the video at this point. Right then, now we've got all those screws back in there then, we just now need to actually put the back on again. And that goes on there like that. Again, screws in, so it's speed up video time. And that's it. Your BeatStep Pro is now working. We just need to put the knobs on. And that's it. Knobs on, things back together again. There we are. BeatStep is now fixed, and you've got a connection here which is not going to fall off. It's not going to create a problem. It's going to be reliable, and your BeatStep is now up and running and working once more. Thank you very much. My name's Paul Schlitto, and I hope you've learned something interesting from here, and that you don't have to throw your BeatStep away or go and buy another one, and you don't even have to send it off to Arturia, because you could actually fix this for yourself, and it won't cost you a penny other than the time and the effort to actually do this little job. Thank you and goodbye.